Hey everybody, welcome in. It's another edition of the Doug Russell Television Show right here on sportsradio1250.com. I have to get this off my chest. It's something that's been bothering me for a while. It's all the hatred towards Brett Favre. Look, I understand he's with the enemy. I know you can't root for the Vikings if you're a Packers fan. I'm not rooting for the Vikings on Sunday because I am a Packers fan. But you think about Brett Favre, and there's so much hatred. There's so much vitriol. There's so much just pure anger about a guy who wanted to improve his own lot. Now, you can say, well, he betrayed us. He went from, our team to the enemy, and he engineered his own ouster. Well, that may be true, and it could have been done maybe a little bit differently, maybe with a little bit more dignity on both sides, but there's still this anger. And that's what I don't understand, because he spent 16 years as a Green Bay Packer. Before Brett Favre came to Green Bay, the Packers were absolutely irrelevant. They didn't suck out loud. They weren't the worst thing on earth, but that's what they were irrelevant. They were 8-8 most years. They were mediocre. They didn't go to the playoffs. When Brett came here, he lifted the entire organization, the entire franchise. Obviously, it started before him with Bob Harlan, who hired Ron Wolf, who hired Mike Holmgren, and then Wolf engineered the trade for Brett Favre and then convinced Reggie White to come to Green Bay. But Brett had so much to do with it. And for most of us, unless you're a little bit older than me, unless you remember the 1960s, you don't remember the Packers as a juggernaut team. In the 1990s, we had that, and it was because of Brett. Now, when Ted Thompson was hired, there was obviously a disconnect between Favre and Thompson, and Brett wanted more help, at least as far as player personnel. Ted wanted to go a different route. Ted drafted Aaron Rodgers with his first overall draft pick, and the history will show that, at least in my opinion, Ted wanted to move on a little bit earlier, maybe a couple of years earlier with Aaron than what we saw with Rodgers being a 3-year backup. He wanted to push Brett out the door. Is there some truth to that? I think there is. So what Brett saw was an opportunity to play somewhere else, an opportunity to be with a franchise that was more aggressive, and that's how he engineered his ouster eventually to Minnesota. I'm not angry about it. I'm not upset at Brett about it. I'm more upset at Ted for taking as long as he did to make the Packers into a Super Bowl contender. I hope that's where the Packers are, and I hope that's where they'll be for a while. Brett didn't have time to wait. So if the Packers didn't want Brett and Brett didn't want the Packers, what's the difference? I understand he's with the enemy. I'm not asking you to root for him. I'm just asking you to understand where he's coming from, because that's where I think a lot of Packers fans are coming from. And I know there's still a lot going back and forth between the two sides, at least as far as the Favre camp versus the Packers camp. All I'm saying is that you can meet in the middle somewhere. Just my 2 cents for the day. Hope you have a great one. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning starting at 5 a.m. on the Doug and Mike Show right here on sportsradio1250.com and, of course, on the radio AM 1250 WSSP. Have a great day, everybody.
Doug Russell Show. Doug Russell Show.